Hello, and welcome. If you've clicked on this video, perhaps you're in a season where life feels relentless, where each day brings another wave of change you didn't ask for, another current trying to move you from where you thought you belonged, where holding on has become exhausting, but letting go feels impossible. Before we begin our story together, if you find even a moment of peace in these words, feel free to like the video and join our quiet community by subscribing. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Share one thing you've been holding onto tightly, or one small way you've learned to bend without breaking. Now, settle in. Take a deep breath. Let's journey to a place where a mountain stream wends its way through an ancient valley, carrying with it stories older than memory. Deep in this valley, where morning mist danced between towering pines, there lived a stone. Not just any stone, but one that had stood proud and unmoved in the heart of the stream for more years than the oldest trees could remember. The stone was magnificent granite strong, with veins of quartz that caught sunlight like captured lightning. It had weathered countless storms, stood firm through spring floods, and remained steadfast when lesser rocks tumbled away downstream. This stone knew who it was, the anchor, the constant, the thing that did not change. But the river. The river had other plans. Day by day, the water flowed around the stone's edges with gentle persistence. The stone barely noticed at first just the familiar caress of current, the soft whisper of water finding its way. But as seasons turned to years, the stone began to feel something troubling. Its sharp edges were growing smooth. Its towering height was slowly diminishing. "Stop," the stone would murmur to the river each morning. "I am meant to be here. I have always been here. This is who I am." But the river never answered with words. It simply continued its ancient song, patient and constant, carrying tiny pieces of the stone away grain by grain, crystal by crystal. The stone began to resist with everything it had. It tensed against the current, tried to make itself harder, more immovable. It watched in frustration as softer stones downstream simply rolled with the flow, tumbling smoothly along the riverbed. Weak, the stone thought. They don't understand what it means to have purpose, to hold your ground. Years passed. The stone's resistance grew into a kind of bitter pride. Each lost grain felt like defeat. Each smooth edge seemed like surrender. The stone told itself that staying exactly the same was strength, that changing was failing, that the river was stealing something precious from its very essence. "I will not become less than I am," the stone declared to the valley. "I will not let this water diminish me." But deep inside, in places it didn't want to acknowledge, the stone was growing tired. The constant fight against an endless flow was wearing it down in ways that had nothing to do with erosion. The stone was becoming harder not just in texture, but in spirit, rigid with the exhaustion of perpetual resistance. The breaking point came during the spring of the heaviest rains anyone could remember. The gentle stream transformed into a rushing torrent, carrying with it fallen branches, loose rocks, and the debris of winter's end. The water that had whispered for decades now roared with urgent force. The stone braced itself as it never had before. This was the test. This was the moment when its years of resistance would prove their worth. It would show the river, show the valley, show itself that some things simply do not yield. For 3 days and nights, the stone held firm against the flood. Water crashed against it with tremendous force, creating whirlpools and foam. The stone felt pride surge through its crystalline heart. "I am stronger than change," it thought. "I am, and then it happened. Not all at once, like a dramatic shattering in a storm. Instead, one morning after the waters had calmed, the stone looked down and saw something that filled it with a terror deeper than any flood. A crack. Small, almost invisible, but running straight through its core like a lightning bolt made of shadow. "No," the stone whispered. "No, no, no." But over the following days, the crack widened. Water seeped into the fissure, freezing at night, expanding, creating pressure from within. The stone that had resisted external force for so long found itself being broken apart by its own accumulated stress, its own rigid refusal to bend. On a quiet Tuesday morning, with no fanfare or dramatic moment, the stone simply separated. One piece, then two, then several smaller fragments settling into new positions along the stream. The great immovable stone that had defined this stretch of river for generations was gone. In its place lay scattered pieces, still granite, still shot through with veins of quartz, but no longer the towering presence that had fought the current for so long. The stone, or what had been the stone, felt something beyond devastation. It felt erasure. "I am nothing now," each fragment whispered to itself. "I have become what I swore I would never become. I have been defeated." It was the old heron who first helped the scattered stones understand. She had fished these waters for 20 years, her long legs picking careful paths through the current. She had watched the great stone's decades-long battle with the river, had seen its pride and its resistance, had witnessed both its strength and its eventual breaking. Now she stood among the fragments, her wise eyes reflecting the morning light. "You think you have been diminished," she said softly, her voice like wind through reeds. "You think the river has taken your purpose away." The largest fragment, which still held most of the stone's original awareness, could barely find voice to respond. "I was meant to be one thing, strong and movable. Now I am scattered, broken, nothing." The heron tilted her head, considering. "Look around you," she said. "What do you see?" Reluctantly, the fragments began to truly observe their surroundings for the first time since the breaking. The largest piece found itself positioned at just the right height to create a perfect resting spot for small birds. Another fragment had settled in a way that created a calm pool where young fish could shelter from the current. The smallest pieces had arranged themselves in a gentle curve that guided the water's flow in a new, more graceful pattern. "The river has been trying to teach you something for many years," the heron continued. "It was never trying to destroy you. It was trying to help you become who you were truly meant to be." The stone fragments listened, something stirring in their granite hearts. "You thought your purpose was to resist," the heron said. "But your true purpose was to serve." The river knew what this valley needed, not a barrier, but a bridge. Not resistance, but guidance. Not one immovable stone, but many stones that help others find their way. As the days passed, the fragments began to notice something remarkable. Travelers crossing the valley would step carefully from piece to piece, using them as stepping stones to cross the stream safely. Children would sit on the larger fragment while their parents rested. The smaller pieces created little rapids that sang more beautifully than the water ever had when it rushed around the original stone's rigid form. "You didn't break," the heron explained one evening as sunset painted the water gold. "You became a path." The stone fragments felt something they had never experienced in all their years of proud solitude, the deep satisfaction of truly serving others. Each day brought new travelers who needed exactly what the stones could now provide. Their breaking had not been defeat, it had been transformation into their highest purpose. Seasons turned, and the scattered stones began to understand their new existence not as fragments of something broken, but as parts of something beautifully complete. They were no longer trying to be what they had been, but were becoming what they were meant to be. The largest stone learned to take pride not in its immovability, but in its stability as a resting place. Countless travelers paused there to catch their breath, to watch the water flow, to find a moment of peace in their journeys. Children used it as a launching point for their first brave leaps across the stream. The medium stones discovered their gift for creating perfect intervals, not too close, not too far apart, but spaced just right to help people of all ages cross safely. They learned to shift slightly with the seasons, adjusting to water levels, accommodating the river's changing moods rather than fighting them. The smallest fragments found joy in their role as music makers. As water flowed over and around them, they created gentle sounds that became the valley's lullaby. Birds would come to drink where the smallest stones created shallow pools. Insects would rest on their sun-warmed surfaces. What had once been one proud, solitary stone had become a community, each piece serving its own purpose while contributing to something larger than any of them could be alone. Years later, when new travelers discovered this crossing place, they would marvel at how perfectly arranged everything seemed. "It's as if these stones were placed here on purpose," they would say. As if someone knew exactly where each one needed to be. The stones would smile their granite smiles, understanding now what the river had known all along. Sometimes what looks like breaking is actually becoming. Sometimes resistance isn't strength, adaptation is. Sometimes the most beautiful purpose emerges not from staying the same, but from allowing ourselves to be transformed by the currents of life. The old heron, now even older and wiser, would sometimes tell the story to younger birds. "The great stone thought its strength lay in never changing," she would say. But its true strength was revealed only when it learned to change with grace. And the river? The river continued its ancient flow, carrying new stories, shaping new stones, whispering the same patient truth it had always known, that the most beautiful transformations happen not in spite of life's currents, but because of them. And so the stone learned that breaking and becoming are sometimes the same thing. That resistance, while it feels like strength, can become the very thing that keeps us from our true purpose. That the forces we fight against might actually be the ones trying to guide us toward who we're meant to be. Perhaps our own lives flow like this river. The changes we resist, the currents that seem to wear us down, the moments when we feel ourselves breaking apart. What if these aren't punishments, but invitations? What if the very things that challenge our rigid ideas of who we are might be trying to help us discover who we could become? The stone story reminds us that sometimes our greatest fear, losing who we think we are, is actually the doorway to becoming who we're truly meant to be. That flexibility isn't weakness, but wisdom. That allowing life to shape us doesn't diminish us, it reveals our capacity to serve, to help, to be part of something beautiful and purposeful. When you feel the currents of change pulling at the edges of your certainty, when life seems to be asking you to let go of who you've always been, remember the stone. Remember that what feels like breaking might be becoming. That the river knows things we don't yet understand. That sometimes the most courageous thing we can do is stop fighting the flow and trust where it wants to take us. Your resistance has served you well, it has kept you strong through difficult times. But perhaps now, like the stone, you're being invited to discover what lies beyond resistance. To become not what you've always been, but what you're meant to be. May you find the wisdom to know when to stand firm and when to flow. May you discover that your breaking points might actually be your becoming points. May you trust that the currents shaping your life are guided by a wisdom deeper than your fear. Be well, and let yourself be moved by the gentle, persistent flow of grace.